welcome. We'll get started very shortly. Until then, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Hi, everyone. Welcome to The Path Forward, a quick and informative discussion on a Thursday night about the hurdles we overcame in 2023, our many achievements, and also what's next for our team and the brilliant inside and outside organizers who we work alongside. I'm so excited to join you tonight. My name is Josh Stickney, and I use he, him pronouns. I'm the Director of Communications here at the Ella Baker Center, where with our team of exceptional communicators, we work alongside our organizers to fight for and win crucial policy advancements to help us liberate our friends and loved ones inside. At a time when information and misinformation are getting harder and harder to tell apart, I take the work of communicating about our policy priorities as seriously as working to advance the policies themselves. So in a moment, I'll be joined by some of our policy team members, James and Thanh, to share why we're here today, and also some of our current policy and organizing work. Then we'll hear from our incredible Inside Policy Fellow, Macio Lindsey, about his experience in our fellowship and affecting change. And finally, I'll chat with our Prison Advocacy Coordinator, Morgan Zamora, about what's ahead. We invite you to fill the chat with your questions, and toward the end of the call, my colleague Ashley will facilitate answering them. Now, it's my pleasure to pass the mic to Marlene Sanchez, our fearless executive director, who probably needs no introduction from you all. Marlene, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Josh. Good evening, everyone. My name is Marlene Sanchez. I use she and her pronouns. Just want to thank you all for being here today. I know that it's been difficult, and so I really appreciate folks being here with us today to really hear what's up for us and what's been going on in a reflection. The Ella Baker Center is calling from unceded Ohlone territory, also known as Oakland, California. So please continue to write where you're coming from in the chat, your name, your pronoun. I want to also, in addition to just acknowledging the land, I want to acknowledge the land, the labor, and the sacrifice of the Ohlone people who still occupy, take care, and heal these lands. We respect the past, present, and future of Indigenous people around the globe. We stand with the Palestinian people in their fight for safety and liberation. We work to build and leave a better world for the 7 generations coming behind us and the 7 generations after them. In addition to acknowledging the land and Mother Earth, I've been taught by my elders to also acknowledge the directions that we're all coming from. I want to acknowledge the West, the direction of women, the direction of water, the direction of healing, and the direction of new beginnings. The East, the direction of men, the direction of our sons and brothers, the direction of fire. The direction of the South, the direction of children, the direction of innocence and laughter, the direction of the earth. The direction of the North, our elders, our ancestors, the direction of air and breath. We acknowledge the center, our two-spirited relatives, the direction of community, and the direction of interconnection. We acknowledge the heavens and transition. And if you all can please join me in just taking a moment of silence to continue to pray and send energy and continue to pray for the lives lost in Palestine, Israel, and here at home. Thank you. Let's continue to build the world where all children get to live to be free, get to live to be old, where our communities can thrive, and where we can continue to be safe. I want to thank the Ella Baker Center staff for all their hard work and all of our partners and allies and members, because we do not do this alone. So thank you. Those who have been working towards justice are grappling with what you heard Josh mention, this pushback and dangerous tough on crime narrative and widespread misinformation. We know these measures are harmful, and they have been proven to fail time and time again. Because of this, at the Ella Baker Center, we continue to fight for racial and economic justice. Tonight, we'll share a legislative review of those policies we've worked on. You'll hear from our staff. You'll hear from our inside and outside fellows who are leading the way and helping incarcerated communities meet the current political moment. Everything we do right now holds significance to turn the tide. We are here together because we have so much to still learn from each other, and there is so much opportunity to still collaborate. I'm excited for our program team to share what they've learned and what's up in the coming year. And I will pass it back to our amazing moderator, Josh.
Thank you so much, Marlene. We are so lucky to have you to share your wisdom and direction with us. And we will see you at the very end of our programming today. It's now my honor, and honestly, I'm about to have a lot of fun, to introduce to you 2 of our incredible program team members, James and Thanh. They mean so much to me, and I'm so excited for this exciting opportunity. James, I'm going to let you introduce yourself first.
Thanks, Josh. Oh, I'm so excited to be here and for this conversation. James, I use he, him pronouns, and my role at the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights is co-director of programs. Especially excited to be in this part of the conversation with Todd. We've been doing this since our Say I Quit days. It feels like a full circle moment for me. So really excited for this conversation.
Thanks, James. And Thanh, will you introduce yourself to our audience tonight?
Absolutely. Thank you all for coming. My name is Tran, pronouns he, him, and I'm the policy associate with the Ella Baker Center. And like James said, I'm super happy to be here today. I'm excited for the rest of our program.
Yeah, this just feels like some friends who happen to work on policy together, just getting together for a chat. So James, Thanh, and I get to talk about policy all the time, but we're excited to have this conversation with so many of you tonight. And I want to start with you, James. You know, a lot happened in this 2023 legislative year. Can you hit a few of the highlights and some of the lowlights if necessary for us? And also tell us how EBC was involved.
Sure. Really appreciate that question, Josh. This was a really interesting session. And frankly, I don't know that I can truly do it justice. From the beginning of the legislative cycle this year, there was a lot of community engagement, lots of bills that people either felt personally connected to or that were effectively organized by organizations across the state. Early on, the public safety hearings heard bills promoting tough on crime responses to fentanyl overdoses and other issues. Moms, DAs, and survivors were front and center and participated eagerly. It got really tense and emotional a lot of times, and their pain and frustration is real and very understandable. At the same time, those of us who have direct lived experience with the criminal legal system in California and the last era of tough on crime rhetoric and policies know that going down that path not only doesn't create more community safety, it actually harms and oppresses many of the same people it purports to protect. We had champions on public safety like Assembly members Mia Bonta, Reggie Jones Sawyer, Senators Weiner and Skinner, who did their best to hold the line and advocated movingly, I think, for real solutions. But there's a lot more to be done and a lot more education needed. We fully expect next year to be more of the same. So consider this a very early call to action. Next year, there are going to be many calls to come to Sacramento to lobby for important reforms, to get involved. If you can, please come through and get involved.
Yeah, James, we're ready, and we're going to talk about some of the ways folks can get plugged in later. Thanks for setting the table for us. Can you give us a rundown of the specifics, like the nitty gritty, some of the things that moved this year?
Sure. Two that I'm really excited about are AB 1118 by Assemblymember Cara, which made appeals under the Racial Justice Act simpler and fixed a lot of technical issues. It's going to make it easier for people on death row to raise Racial Justice Act claims, and it's going to allow people denied Racial Justice Acts habeas petitions. And it clarifies that a case doesn't have to be set for trial for someone to make a claim. Another one that we're all really excited about is SB 474, the Basics Act by Senator Becker. It limits the markups of items sold in California state prison canteens to 35% above the price that the vendors pay until 2028. And it's going to do a lot to reduce price gouging on essential supplies for people who are incarcerated and their families. So excited to say that both of those bills made it all of the way through the process, were signed by the governor, and will be taking effect early next year. A couple of our other efforts became 2-year bills. First up is SB 94 by Senator Cortese. That one restores judicial discretion for individuals serving life without the possibility of parole for offenses committed prior to June 5th, 1990, with some exceptions. But and people who have served at least 20 in that category, who have served at least 25 years consistently of their sentence. That one is now a 2-year effort, and the folks are already gearing at the bit to get back to Sacramento early next year, start lobbying for this important bill. Two others are AB 544 and ACA 4, both democracy in action bills, being bottom line by Thanh here, that AB 544 is meant to increase polling sites and access to voting for people in county jails. And ACA 4 is about amending Article 2, Section 4 to remove the disqualification of currently incarcerated people from civic participation. It's going to allow currently incarcerated people to vote, and they're both moving into the going forward next year. Then I guess I'll name a few other bills that we either supported or opposed that had mixed results as well. One is SB 81 by Senator Skinner and Senator Becker, put forward by the California Alliance for Parole Reform, of which we're founding members, along with California Coalition of Women Prisoners, CURB, Initiate Justice, Uncommon Law, and others, which would have raised the standard of denials for suitability upon judicial review for people going through the parole board process. We made it all the way through the legislature. Unfortunately, the governor vetoed the bill. AB 600 by Assemblymember Ting addresses some of the resentencing issues. And what it does is it's going to allow courts to initiate resentencing past the current 120-day mark that they're currently allowed to. We're really excited about that and like excited for the champions who moved it forward. The other one is AB 1306, the HOME Act, which was put forward by Assemblymember Carrillo, which would have stopped CDCR from directly notifying ICE about people who are being released with immigration holds. So shout out to the HOME Act, shout out to the folks who have continued to champion that bill, and looking forward to the advocacy and fight for it next year as well.
Yeah, I'm seeing in the chat, the HOME Act meant a lot to people. We've been working on that for a long time, and there's no doubt, and I'm kind of convenient we ended with those last three bills, that it was a tough year, James. Even with some of the encouraging wins that you talked about a second ago, can you talk a little bit about why this legislative year was so hard? And was it misinformation? What was it out there?
I mean, there was a lot of misinformation out there. I don't want to give that misinformation a platform, so I won't repeat it here. I will say, however, that just 3 years ago, we were in a very different place. Following the murders of George Floyd and others by police officers, the narratives were that Black lives do matter, that policing and prisons were inherently racist institutions. Today, we see those same narratives replaced by sensationalized images, organized retail theft, fentanyl overdoses, and the proliferation of apps like Citizen that subconsciously promote fear and anxiety in our communities. And with inflation, rising housing prices, and fewer paths to living wages, it is hard out here, and more people are struggling. That's real, and as a result, there are people with agendas who are pushing a return to tough on crime sentencing laws. I can tell you from experience that when fear-based carceral responses drive our criminal legal policy discussions, it makes it more likely that laws may be enacted that will impact people and communities with less resources for decades to come. We're in a moment in California in which we need to be very clear. There are no policing solutions to California's housing crisis. Punishment will not protect people who are turning to substance use. If we truly want to keep our communities safe, we need to work together to provide opportunities and pathways for economic empowerment. And we need to prioritize healing and restorative practices that recognize that none of us are disposable. We all have value and common needs.
Yeah, James, I mean, you summed it up a lot better than I think any of the reporters who are writing on this. There's a lot of folks who want to simplify this, but I think you're right. There's so many things that contributed to the tough year. Thanh, you've been quiet, and I know you're chomping at the bit to chat a little bit. This year, the governor announced something that was a little bit of a shock to us who've been seeing real progress on prison closures, but he announced an expansion of the facilities, the physical facilities at San Quentin State Prison this year. And I just hope you can tell us a little bit about what that means for the folks inside San Quentin right now. And then can you also talk about what kind of impact this has on you? Because I mean, you just left the walls of San Quentin, and I just know that this has got to have an impact on you personally.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for the question. And this has meant a few things for our folks incarcerated at San Quentin. And I'll preface by saying, because of the extreme sentences and horrific living conditions that people are subjected to, people inside are always interested in a better quality of life, and people don't want to be there, of course, but if they have to be, they want the best humane conditions possible. That said, people incarcerated at San Quentin have good reason to doubt that this rehabilitation center will actually lead to anything positive. And actually what has happened is anything but positive, right? Some of the things that has happened so far is one of the biggest things was almost immediately there was retaliation from the guards after the announcement. The guards there scoffed at it. They were like, rehabilitation center? Yeah, right. Right. And then the guards actually locked the prison down, did mass searches in response to this. They increased their level of stop and frisk inside of the prisons. So they were stopping people from going to programs, right? They said, you want a program? We got something for you. That would stop them on their way to programs, frisk them, find any reason to stop them from being able to do anything positive. They verbally ridiculed people. So literally while they're stopping and frisking people, they're whispering them, you think this is going to turn into a rehabilitation center? Like, this is literally what people on site are telling us. Like, this is what's happening after this was announced, right? And this was ongoing until we went to the media to expose this. So now after it was exposed that the guards were doing this, they're a little bit more tame, but they're still hostile to our folks inside. And regarding to like how I'm receiving it, right? So like you named, I was in San Quentin recently, and I was there when the outbreak occurred, right? So I was in that 4x9 cage, right? And for months I didn't see daylight. They let us shower once a week, if that. And over 20 incarcerated people died from COVID in cells all around me. So when I hear that they want to spend over 300 million to make a fancy rehabilitation center, but not change the actual living conditions that caused dozens of people to die around me, that boggles my mind. That confuses me, right? And that angers our folks inside. And our folks are still living in the same conditions that caused dozens of us to die. And CDCR to this day refuses to be accountable for those deaths. Instead, they would rather spend over 300 million to build a shiny new toy, right? And that doesn't make sense to me. Right? Our incarcerated loved ones are saying the same things that we're saying. They're saying to save lives, the only way to do that is to reduce the overcrowding, not build a $300 million shiny object. So that's how that affected my folks inside, and that's how it affects me, being that I'm fairly fresh out those cages.
Yeah, Tan, and we're I think every time you talk about the conditions inside during COVID, I'm just floored that not a single lesson was learned. Lives were saved because of efforts to reduce the prison pop, and we just look at that like, oh, that's not a viable solution. It's a shame. So, Tan, I want to ask you what else is being done in the efforts to close prisons, and what kind of work is being done alongside the folks inside themselves?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a great question. I think the key part of that was alongside our folks inside, right? So shout out to all of our currently incarcerated organizers. Folks at San Quentin actually started an incarcerated coalition called the People in Blue, right? And they started making and naming their demands to the prison administration. And they're calling for decarceration and a transparent process when it comes to this San Quentin Rehabilitation Center. But I also want to name that our folks inside are faced with the hard dilemma, right? Like every waking moment, they are subjected to those cruel conditions, like I named earlier, that killed dozens of people. They have to wake up to that every day. So when administration says that, hey, we will build this $300 million building that got some AC in it, people who have to live their lives in prison have to make a hard choice, right? Like they have to choose between easing some of their suffering now, or fighting for something that may not happen, right? Like there's no guarantee we'll be able to shut down this rehabilitation center. So some of our folks inside are throwing their hands up and saying, well, if this will make my life more tolerable inside, we will take it, right? While others recognize that this rehabilitation center, this model, this is just the beginning of a new model of incarceration, and that this could potentially spark another prison building boom, right? So we got a mixed bag inside in regards to how folks are feeling about this San Quentin model thing, but that's what our folks inside are doing. They're organizing themselves, right? They're not waiting for us. So shout out to them. And I also want to say, like I named, we're organizing alongside our incarcerated organizers, and we're lifting up their demands. We recently did a climate impact report in partnership with our folks inside and UCLA, right? And we're using this data that they found from all of these different climate impacts, right? And also like really highlighting how there was no real response to a disaster or a pandemic like COVID and all of the many other pandemics before. So using this research and data, right, we're able to call for more prisons to be shut down alongside with our folks inside and asking them to release more people, not create a super prison. So that's what we've been doing with our folks on the inside. And, you know, we got one of our great inside fellows who we might hear from later, maybe not.
Maybe. Yeah, we're definitely going to hear from Macio in a second. I want to just close out this section, get some like candid takes from you both, James and Thanh. And James, if you'll start us out. But we had some successes and like Thanh said, some real setbacks, not just in the legislature, but really in the political climate. What made certain things easier this year and certain things tougher, and just kind of leave us with a little bit of your wisdom.
Yeah, I mean, I've circled back to a point that Todd just made, because I think it's so important to just like rename. CDCR can't effectively run prisons. They're literally under receivership right now and facing millions of dollars in fines daily because they can't do their basic function. So the idea that they could run rehabilitation, some kind of whatever, is, you know, ludicrous on the face of it. For me, when I think about the challenges this year and the successes, I'm always reminded of when I began my journey through the California prison system back in 2004, and nothing was moving. No one was going home. If you had an indeterminate sentence, then there were no viable paths for your release at that time. And we may not be moving, well, we're not moving as quickly and as we would like to right now, but we're a long way from where we were back then. The metaphor I used earlier this week is the ceiling isn't as high as we want it to be right now, but the floor absolutely is a lot higher. I just feel like it's important to name that we've had a lot of success over the course of the last 15 years. A lot of people have come home, because not just people on the screen, but people, participants who are watching, everybody, and as a community, is the way that we've shown up and supported our loved ones. And now is the time to invest even more, to meet the challenge, to meet the moment, to show up and show out, because the pushback is coming because we're winning. And we need to, if we want to keep winning, if we want to keep pushing, now is the time to really get engaged and really get involved.
How about you, Thanh? How do we differentiate here? Spit some words, Thanh.
Absolutely. I mean, how do I follow up what James just said, right? Like, for real, I hope y'all really heard James here. It's like we're having the difficulties that we're having because we've been winning, right? Like, our people, we've been showing up. And I think another thing that I'll name in regards to one of the difficulties too is that, you know, we're seeing the rise of some far right extremists, right? They're doxing our people. They're making our work harder, right? But that to me is like, you know, folks always said, if you ain't got haters, you're not doing it right, right? So it's kind of the same vibe, similar vibes. So shout out to that. But no, seriously, on a serious note, like we have definite opposition. And I think more important, it's reminding us more that now is the time for us to be more vigilant than ever, right? Like, we have to show up at the Capitol. We have to respond when there's public comment opportunities, right? We have to show up in city council. We have to show up on state levels and city levels and local levels. So I just want to, on top of what everything James said, plus winning that and just lifting up, like, vigilance is what's required, right? Like, we need that to be able to continue to rise to the occasion that is happening today. So,
and Thanh, James, thanks so much. I mean, thanks for your expertise. Thanks for being personal with us today. I am probably, like many, inspired by our wins, but also deeply motivated and frustrated to get back to work to fight some of these really dangerous oppositions out there. So like Thanh mentioned, I know we're all excited. We're now going to hear from our comrade inside and our 2023 Inside Policy Fellow, Macio Lindsey. And so if you're multitasking, if you're planning dinner, put the phone down. This is the section you're going to want to hear tonight. So while unfortunately Macio couldn't call in tonight, he did record a message for you, and we're very excited to share that with you.
My name is Macio, Lindsey, and I'm an Inside Policy Fellow with the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights. The Inside Outside Fellowship has been a great experience that has exceeded my wildest expectations. It has given me firsthand knowledge of the legislative process, increased my confidence as an organizer, demonstrated the importance of collaboration, and through the fellowship, inspired people to action. EBC's fellowship is meeting inside organizing needs as we speak, by going into prisons to enlist people with the passion to organize around policy campaigns, have mobilized people like never before, maximizing the full potential of people while valuing their lived experience and resilience. No longer do we want to sit on the sidelines of decisions that affect us. Fortunately, our value is now being recognized and utilized in spaces where our expertise is essential. EBC is equipping us to effectively meet this moment. Regrettably, many of us on the inside were unfamiliar with the legislative process, how laws that incarcerate for a lifetime are made. For years, we sought relief in courts that was never bestowed. Unbeknown to many of us, we were fighting a losing battle from the start. However, our eyes are now open to the fact that our fight does not begin in the courts, but in the legislature. With this newfound information, inside advocates readjusted their focus, realigned their agenda, and pursued policy. When new laws fell short of helping our situations, we took pen to paper and began to advocate for ourselves, reaching out to organizations like EBC with policy proposals. Some of us leveraged the education we gained through progressive laws that now affords a college education in prison. We built upon the enhanced programming and insight gained from self-help classes. Eventually, our collective work with organizations like EBC started to pay off as we began to see people released from prison after decades. These events sparked our enthusiasm and energized us to participatory action. EBC is the roll up your sleeves and get involved organization. The Ella Baker Center also recognized that people power is directly linked to their collective voices. For decades, those incarcerated have been voiceless, faceless, and seemingly overlooked. Those of us on the inside have always had a vision of how our circumstances should be, but we lack the platform to implement change. However, the fellowship has given us a platform and a voice. This wasn't an easy task, as many barriers exist to having a voice in prison, particularly our inability to be present in certain spaces. Nevertheless, EBC maximized every communication tool available. My name is Macio, Lindsey, and I'm an inside. Much potential invoke optimism that change is possible. When there is hope, there is action. A synergy of human effort to advocate for change and to invest the time to see it through. We are committed to the work to improve our circumstances as we have become so much more than our incarceration. Our passion to learn and share knowledge is demonstrated by classes popping up at prisons everywhere throughout California, teaching civic engagement and public policy. There is a generation of organizers, advocates, and policy professionals in the making. When our outside community acknowledges our humanity and worth, it promotes self-actualization to those who have existed in the shadows of prison walls for decades. For me, and many others, inside organizing and advocacy will never be the same, thanks to Ella Baker Center's Inside Outside Fellowship. Thank you.
Wow. Every line Macio spits, whether it's tonight or in those coalition meetings, like he mentioned, everything he says is gold and so wise. One line really stood out to me tonight. That's when there is hope, there is action. When there is hope, there is action. And I'll be taking that. I jotted that down. I'll be taking that with me for a long time. So I see the chats lighting up with a lot of love and flowers for Macio. Keep it going. We'll share that with him. And now I'm so excited to be joined by our prison advocacy coordinator, Morgan Zamora, who is one of EBC's newest team members, but joins us with tons of experience in the movement and working with incarcerated folks. Morgan, hi. Will you introduce yourself to folks tonight?
Hi, Josh, and so grateful to be here and be part of this team. My name is Morgan Zamora, pronouns she, her. I'm the prison advocacy coordinator here at EBC. In my role, I help manage our prison mail program, where we're in communication with over 10,000 individuals who are currently incarcerated in the state of California. I also work on our Pathways to Freedom work, which includes policy and implementation of our resentencing laws, including the California Racial Justice Act, as well as work on some of our regulation changes in case law tracking.
Yeah, and if you've been following EBC for a while, you're probably dying to hear what's next for RJA. We're going to talk about that in a second. But Morgan, let's first talk about what's on the horizon for EBC. What things are we looking to work on in 2024 and beyond?
Yeah, lots coming up in this next year. EBC continues to center incarcerated voices and champion self-advocacy through our outreach and policy work. As Macio already mentioned, we're deep in our policy planning process for this upcoming year. We've received over 100 policy proposals from folks currently incarcerated in the state of California, and we're working in conjunction with folks on the inside. We're able to bring some of their brilliant ideas to light and collaborate to determine ways to better implement our current pathways to freedom, improve programming and conditions during incarceration, and increase opportunities for successful reentry back into society. As Thanh touched on, we're working to increase advocacy in jails around voting rights by expanding ballot access and educating folks on democratic literacy. With the upcoming election, it's especially important to ensure that the rights of all individuals eligible to vote in the state of California are being preserved and protected. This past year, we also launched our Hidden Hazards Climate Report, which demonstrates that half of California's 36 prisons and those human beings held within these facilities are vulnerable to the disastrous effects of climate change, including extreme heat, wildfires, and floods. In 2024, we'll continue to push for the state to pass legislation that results in significant population reductions and also to close state prisons. We recognize that mass incarceration is also an environmental justice issue, and that something needs to be done to defend these populations most at risk to climate disasters. Both our Hidden Hazards Report and our webinar on these impacts of climate change on incarcerated populations can be found on our Hidden Hazards webpage. We also want to continue to invest in those incarcerated populations that are generally excluded from parole consideration, as well as most legislatively created opportunities for resentencing due to these really unfair and unjust blanket exclusions. We're doing this through continued investment in populations sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, including a continued push for the passage of SB 94, which became a 2-year bill this year and aims to restore judicial discretion for individuals serving LWOP for offenses committed before June 5th, 1990. In addition, we're hoping to expand our pre-existing clemency and commutations work, building a campaign to educate the community and uplift the success of those who have been given a second chance through this executive power. The California Racial Justice Act also serves as a lifeline for those with LWOP who are categorically ineligible for so many other forms of relief. By increasing knowledge of how to approach these alternative pathways, we're hoping to help combat the effects that negative media and misinformation have had on both the legislature and judicial decisions over this past year, and hopefully create meaningful opportunities for all folks to regain their freedom.
Yeah, Morgan, thank you for touching on the ends there about the misinformation. Can you talk a little bit more about how information and misinformation about crime in the media is just wrong, and tell us how some of that information is enhancing these really dangerous narratives that are out there?
Absolutely. We all know that the war on drugs bolstered the increased policing and criminalization of people of color and those with low socioeconomic status. Over 50 years later, we're seeing a lot of the same rhetoric being used to justify harsher sentencing practices and bloated budgets for carceral institutions. But the reality is that this narrative that's been presented and that pervades the media is incorrect. If you look at actual statistics and crime reports from this past year, they suggest that violent crime is decreasing throughout the state and that California is seeing one of its greatest drops in homicide in recent history. Data also shows us that youth, those born after 1990, see significantly less contact with the criminal legal system overall. There's been an 89% decrease in youth arrests in Alameda County and statewide since 2007. Despite this severe drop in crime and overall arrests, racial disparities have significantly increased. Back in 2007, the ratio of arrests for white and Black youth was about 1 to 4. And as of last year, young people of color were more than 16 times more likely to be arrested than their white counterparts. Between 2016 and 2020, every single child transferred to the adult criminal legal system in Alameda County was a Black male child. And throughout the state of California, Black youth are significantly more likely to be prosecuted than their white counterparts. Alameda County presents the most significant racial disparities, where Black children are 65 times more likely to be prosecuted in adult court. I bring up some of these numbers to demonstrate how important, how vital it is for us to understand the true impact that these racist, classist, prejudice, and overall dangerous narratives have on actual people, right? These aren't just numbers, these are lives. These are human beings that are being affected, families, generations of people that are being impacted by these laws. And the punitive response to houselessness and to drug sale and use in bills that came forward this year focused on fentanyl, the expansion of 3 strikes, and the backlash to legislation aiming to provide people another chance are, as James already mentioned, really rooted in fear. And this lack of understanding and empathy for others just perpetuates decades and centuries even of disenfranchisement by further harming future generations. The real truth is that the system is going to continue to shrink, right? Where if we're looking at these statistics and that crime is actually decreasing, especially with the youth, the system's going to continue to shrink, and our laws, policies, and actions as a society need to reflect the reality that less carceral punishment and greater investment in community resources actually decrease crime and create safer societies that allow us all to thrive.
Yeah, Morgan, I mean, those statistics, so stark. I want to give folks actually a second to absorb that. So I see Art and Donna asking where you can find those numbers. I think we'll drop that link in later. Also, just while we're on it, if you have some questions, please drop them into the chat. Our team will get to them in a second. But Morgan, you actually get our last question of the night, and I'm so happy to talk about some of the wins that we've had, because I feel like it's easy to lose track of the wins we've had over the years. Can you talk about how we're working to implement those wins and give us a quick rundown on what it takes to put them into action?
Yeah, our Pathways to Freedom work, 1172 resentencing, the California Racial Justice Act, clemency and commutations, which I touched on a little earlier, present a means to protect communities of color and other marginalized groups disproportionately impacted and directly targeted through laws that hypercriminalize and over-sentence populations that have been historically disenfranchised. SB 483, which was passed in 2021, built off of past policy victories to apply the elimination of 1 and 3 year sentence enhancements to people currently held in prisons and jails. SB 483, the RISE Act, represents a meaningful step toward reducing the harm of overly long and unjust sentences. Unfortunately, there have been significant delays in courts and backlog in the appointment of counsel, so that not everyone who is entitled to a full resentencing hearing will have one by the original December 31st deadline. This is just something that happens with the legal system, right? It's not as quick moving as we would all hope that it could be, but EBC is working in partnership with our allies to ensure that everyone who's entitled to a hearing will receive one, even if it is held after the original deadline. And beginning on January 1st, 2024, the California Racial Justice Act opens up to all currently incarcerated individuals serving a sentence for a felony offense. The Racial Justice Act prohibits the state from seeking a conviction or imposing a sentence based on the defendant's race, ethnicity, or national origin, and provides individuals the opportunity to challenge racist conduct against them in their criminal legal proceedings. Retroactive application of this law provides a really vital opportunity for those who have been victim to the racism that permeates the criminal legal system to seek meaningful, tangible relief in a way that no other law before it has really allowed. As James already mentioned, our co-sponsored bill, AB 1118, was recently signed into law and will go into effect at the beginning of next year as well. This bill will make it easier for individuals on death row to raise an RJA claim, allows folks to appeal a denied RJA habeas petition, and clarifies that a case does not have to be set for trial in order to raise a claim. Earlier this month, our team organized a Resentencing and Racial Justice Act training inside San Quentin, featuring members from the Alameda County District Attorney's Resentencing Unit who were able to provide insight into their processes to help folks better prepare to submit their RJA claims. With the help of our Insight organizers and other community organizations, we're planning visits to additional prisons throughout the state to share this knowledge as widely as possible. And we're also hosting additional trainings for loved ones to learn how to best support their people on the inside and preparing to bring their RJA claims once retroactivity begins, and as well as pursue other resentencing avenues and pathways to freedom. On our RJA info page, you can find the most up-to-date resources and information related to our RJA work, including a link to our Racial Justice Act webinar, which provides important information about the law, including the types of discriminatory behaviors that violate the act, as well as how and when to file a claim. EBC is committed to ensuring that all individuals have access to proper representation and needed data to bring claims under the Racial Justice Act. And we're working with our partners to ensure that those impacted by racial discrimination gain access to real justice. This year, so far, we have sent out hundreds of copies of our 1172 resentencing toolkit and our RJA for All guide to help currently incarcerated individuals better understand their opportunities to get back to court. Now that we have these resources translated into Spanish, we're able to increase access to this vital information and hope to continue to expand our language access in the near future.
Yeah, Morgan, thank you so much. You hold so much of our work, and I feel like I learn so much every time I talk to you and hear you speak. I dropped the link in the chat for folks to find out more and request your RJA guide. It's crucial information that we put out there. Morgan, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Morgan and I are going to leave you for a second, and I'm going to pass the mic now to our wonderful development assistant, Ashley, to help us answer some of your questions.
Thank you, Josh. And also thank you to our panelists and also to our audience. We've had some really great questions come in that I'd love to direct to our panelists now. And I also just want to add that we have the opportunity to answer a few more. So if there are any other questions from our audience, please drop them in the chat and I can read them out loud. I'd love to actually direct our first question to Morgan, since it's super relevant to what you were just speaking on from the audience. And it's that, can those people that should have been contacted by now as it pertains to SB 483 file a habeas at this point?
That is a great question. And just for clarification, are these individuals who have not received a hearing yet, or individuals who just feel that they are entitled to relief under this law? I think that presents like two different situations. If they have received nothing. Sorry, just reading the chat. They have received nothing and they have prison priors. Yeah, I think the first step is just ensuring that it's those same prison priors that are listed in under the law itself. I know that there are certain different penal code sections. So even if someone thinks that it might be applicable to their certain situation, it might not necessarily apply if it's under a different penal code section. And I think that for any individuals experiencing this, we would love to have them reach out to our policy@ellabakercenter.org email to just share that information with us so that we can also be in contact with individuals in that specific county or in that area that might be able to better help and represent them on this issue. And so that we're also able to keep track of this and bring it forward, right, when we're asking for these legislative fixes and for increased and continued authority to ensure that everyone receives full resentencing hearings under this law.
Beautiful. Thank you, Morgan. Yes, and if you have any other questions, do feel free to reach out to us. Happy to answer that if we can. I'd love to ask James now, if I can. In your opinion, and can you just share a little bit more, what is the way forward for the Mandela Solitary Confinement Act?
Really appreciate that question. And I can start by saying we're following the lead of people who are more directly working on that important legislation. There was a recent piece in the Sacramento Bee that named that California CDCR has said that they no longer have solitary confinement because they've changed the name to restricted housing. So the name change itself is their attempt to address the policy as they were directed to do by the governor, I think about a year ago. Right now, Assemblymember Holden's bill is parked, and we're hopeful he'll start moving it again next year. But we don't have any inside information that that's the case. Two things we do want to lift up. One is if you aren't already, start plugging in and following our good friend Juan Haynes, who was recently named editor-in-chief of the journalism section of Solitary Watch. They're doing a lot of great work around solitary confinement and connecting it as a human rights abuse perpetuated by our CDCR. And then secondly, there were regulations that were recently put forward by CDCR as emergency regulations, as they often do, that had a very short window of public comment period. Advocates are working to try to have those regulations go through a normal regulatory process. And once that happens, like we'll be sure to spread the word and connect with people about how to plug in. Those are the main ways that we know, and we're also next year committed to following the lead of those who are working more closely on the issue.
Amazing. Thank you. Morgan, I know that you work a little bit on this. Do you have anything that you could add?
Yeah, I think just I think James said a lot of it really perfectly, but just mentioning that this is something that was flagged by folks on the inside as a really big concern, and especially just with the way that CDCR has presented these regulations as emergency regulations when there really is no emergency, and they haven't presented a need to push these through without the regular comment period that folks are entitled to have under state law. And just pushing for CDCR to put forward the full normal 45-day comment period so that individuals actually have an opportunity to respond to these changes and address their concerns. And I think even with the actual stated language in the emergency regulations versus the statement that CDCR put out, there is a lot of discrepancy between those two things. And just making sure that there's an opportunity for folks on the inside as well as community members and advocates to speak on this issue going forward. And we'll be sure to be on top of it and let folks know and draft a public comment that is informed when we do have an opportunity to, and that is really informed by our folks on the inside that have personal experience dealing with this.
Thank you. So another question that we have from our audience, which I'd like to open up to any panelist who's interested in, what are the plans to require the Board of Parole to have clear and non-arbitrary criteria to grant parole, and open to anyone who wants to chime in?
I'll jump in. I really appreciate that question. As we mentioned and as we talked about earlier today, we were all disappointed by the governor's decision to veto SB 81, which would have changed the standard if a person was denied and they appealed that denial at the judicial review level. It would have changed the standard from what basically is a non-existent standard of evidence to a preponderance of evidence. The California Alliance of Parole Reform, of which we are founding members, and shout out to Alicia, who I know is in the is one of the audience members who's also super plugged in. We are currently in the process and just met earlier today thinking about legislation that we're going to tackle next year. It's our belief that one of the most significant sticking points in reducing the incarcerated population, particularly for people with indeterminate sentences, is the parole board process. Currently, less than 2 people who are eligible for relief through the parole suitability process are able to get that relief. And we are, as a coalition and as a commitment, we're going to keep fighting it and advocating for it to expand people's access and make it a real viable pathway for people to get home. For those who are interested in getting more information, reach out to that website that M just dropped in the chat, or reach out to me directly and we can plug you in so that you can follow, track, and support the work. We will be reaching out next year for sure.
Thank you, James, and thank you to the rest of the panelists for your responses. This is all the time we have for the questions now, so I'm going to go ahead and pass it back to Josh.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ashley. But also thank you again to our panelists, Thanh, James, and Morgan, for the night of information. If you, like me, are inspired to action, we've got you covered. There's a few things that you can take, and Macio told us earlier, where there is hope, there is action. And so hopefully you all can join us in just taking a few pretty easy things to get plugged in with us here at EBC. And we have a slide that we'll be pulling up here very quickly, but I'll just start talking. You probably know EBC and our virtual mail nights. Well, we have a holiday card edition of our mail night coming up. You can sign up to join us there at the link on your screen and in the chat. That'll be on November 9th. From 5:30 to 7:30. And for more information about our monthly mail night, please email us at policy@ellabakercenter.org. We'll drop that in the chat as well. The second opportunity is to join our resource organizing crew's holiday card party on November 14th here at the Aloha Club, right around the corner from our office. And we are all about collective action, and we put it here that community is our superpower, we think. So just be on the lookout for communication via email from our team about ways to get involved. As James said, we're putting the clarion call out now because we know we're going to have a lot of things to defeat and a lot of good things to push forward next year. And the last thing is just check your mailbox. It's end of year. There's a lot of clutter. We're all busy. We're traveling, but we've got some special communications we're going to be mailing you from our team, and we'd love for you to check it out to stay up to date. So we look back and we look forward. I really enjoyed guiding you through this and honestly just talking with our amazing team tonight. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Marlene to close us out for tonight. Thank you all so much.
All right. Thank you so much. I have a minute. So just again, shout out to the amazing team, to Macio, our panelists, James, Thanh, Morgan, our moderator, Josh, our behind the scenes staff who made this event possible, our members, our partner organizations that helped us pass these powerful bills. this team gives me a lot of hope. The support that we get from folks on this call, from our board members, from community folks, gives me a lot of hope. Every time I read a letter from somebody on the inside or speak to a family member, gives me a lot of hope. And we are asking that we keep it going, that we need all of us to continue to win in the upcoming year. And we're committed to continuing to invest in the innate leadership of folks, because we know that when we do that, we are creating pathways to freedom. We're creating pathways to power building, community building, and we encourage you to continue to deepen these relationships with us. Like Josh said, join the mailer. For a lot of folks, this is a lifeline. This holiday letter that they get at the end of the year means the world. So again, at EBC, our commitment is to continue to work towards collective liberation by all means, because we are not free until we are all free. So thank you so much for being a part of this amazing community and for building with us and believing in freedom. Have a blessed night, everyone.